Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. Today we are back in the book of Nigerian folklore written down by M.I. Ogumefu. In the first story, a wife gives away something that she doesn't know is invaluable. In the second story, a parrot cannot lie and causes its owners plenty of headaches. And in the third story, some nobles send some societal exiles to the new capital in order to spook the king. Okay, let's begin. The cooking pot. A man once brought home to his wife a very old cooking pot and told her to use it every day when preparing the evening meal. The woman was not pleased with the idea of having to use such a battered vessel and feared that her friends would ridicule her, but she dared not disobey her husband and began to use the pot as he demanded. Little did she guess that this pot was a magic one, and had the virtue of turning the ashes of the fire on which it rested into gold. Every night the husband crept out when all were asleep in the huts around the compound, and gathered together these golden ashes, which he stored safely away. One day a young man in the village was about to set off on a journey, and he came to the woman while her husband was away, and asked a favor of her. He said that he had taken a fancy to her old cooking pot, and would give her a fine new one in exchange for it. The woman hesitated, but as she was ashamed of the ugly old pot, she was glad to have an excuse to get rid of it. When her husband found out what she had done, he was very angry, and he scolded her soundly. But now it was too late to recover the pot, as the young man was already away in the forest. Naturally, he had not obtained the pot without knowing its secret, for he had observed the actions of the man, who so mysteriously collected the ashes every night. And it is said that from this day the young man spent his life cooking, and so he earned the nickname of Chop, meaning food. The end. Okay, and story number 2, The Parrot. There was a gray parrot which knew how to speak, and had the habit of correcting anybody who did not tell the truth. The parrot was the pet of an untruthful woman, and she found the bird's habit so inconvenient that she at length decided to get rid of it. One day a neighbor was passing her house, and the woman called out to him from her threshold to come and see the beautiful tame parrot which she intended to give to him as a present. The man asked her why she desired to part with such a beautiful bird, and to this the woman replied, "Because it eats a great deal, and I am poor." The parrot cried out, "She lies." The neighbor took no notice, thanked the woman, and returned home with the bird on his shoulder. When he reached his house, his wife asked him where he had found the bird. "As I came through the forest, it flew down and perched on my shoulder," replied the man. But the parrot quickly cried out, "He lies!" The man soon discovered how awkward it was to have such a truthful pet, and he was often tempted to wring the bird's neck. It happened that this man was also dishonest, and he stole a great many articles, which he buried in a deep hole, unknown to anybody. He would have been quite secure, but for the wonderful parrot. When the thefts were discovered, a search was made of the man's house, but nothing was found there. Therefore the searchers were forced to consider that the man was innocent. As they went out, they said to him, "Are you sure you have not stolen these things?" "I am sure," said the man indignantly. But the parrot cried out, "He lies!" The man was so enraged that he seized the neck of the bird and he twisted it. But the suspicion of the searchers was aroused, and eventually they discovered the hole, which he had marked with a little stake, and all the stolen articles were found. Had it not been for the truthful parrot, the secret would have never been revealed. The end. Okay, and story number 3. The Ghost Catcher. King Apipa took fancy to remove his whole court to a new capital, and for this purpose he decided to build a town on a certain hill which pleased him. His nobles, however, did not at all desire the change, and some of them met together to make a plan which would turn the king away from his project. They agreed to send certain slaves of amazing appearances, whom they possessed, to haunt the hill after the manner of the ghosts, so that the king would be afraid to build his capital there. One noble sent a hunchback, another an albino, another a leper, and the fourth a dwarf. When the king's messengers arrived to survey the hill, they saw these strange apparitions leaping about with torches in their hands, and shouting with one voice, "Kosi Kosi no room, no room." They returned in terror to the king, and told him that the hill was haunted by ghosts. However, one of the royal advisors suspected a plot, and advised the king to send the hunters to the hill to capture the ghosts. The king took this advice, and the hunters returned with the supposed ghosts, who were, of course, in abject terror at being discovered. Instead of killing them, however, the king kept them hidden, and invited all his nobles to the banquet. When they had feasted merrily, he sent around to each noble a calabash of beer by the hands of a slave. What was the dismay of the 4 rebellious nobles to receive the calabash, one from his hunchback, another from his albino, and the others from the hands of the leper and the dwarf. Obviously the plot had been discovered, and all 4 nobles were expected to be put to death for opposing the king. But the wise Apipa said no word about the matter, and the banquet ended in silence. Soon afterwards the court removed to the new town without any opposition, and henceforth the king was known as the Ghost Catcher. The end. That first story shows why communication is important. If he had told his wife about the magic in the pot, she probably wouldn't have gotten rid of it, but that's all on him. And in the second one, I like that the parrot tells the truth, but I felt bad that it was killed for telling the truth. And the third one seemed to be very othering of people who don't look the same as most of the other people, people who have conditions. It kind of felt like picking on them. I did clean it up a little bit, but I also felt bad for them. Like they didn't have any choice, and their nobles sent them out, and they're like, "Oh man, we're gonna get killed." Okay, and the podcast shout out is to Film Rage. These 3 cool fellows from the frozen north go to the movies so that you don't have to. They see most about anything, and they love to rate them from Mondo to Meh to Rage. Jump in anytime with Jim, Bryce, and the always entertaining Merman. So let these 3 fill your ears with the latest movie ratings. And if you like their show as much as I do, go and give them a like, a rating, and a review. I like those things as well. And the listener shout out is to Jeonrupo, South Korea, currently known as Incheon. Jeonrupo was founded in 1883 at the opening of the Jeonrupo port, and it contains several historical and cultural heritage monuments, such as the Dapdong Cathedral, Honggaemun Gate, the first Anglican church, and Jayu Park, Korea's first modern park. It is also home to the Jajangmyeon Noodle Museum. I'll have to visit in a couple of years. And thanks again to Wikipedia for the research. And so to my listeners in Jeonrupo, I say, 감사합니다. 그리고 잘 자요. Thank you, and sleep well.